everyone, to the episode 9, Follow Your Plan and Not Your Feelings. We're so happy that you've joined us today. Today's webinar is sponsored by Brighten Heights, which is a senior living community that's first of its kind that will be focused on the healthy lifestyle concept. It's to be located in Pee Wee Valley, Kentucky. It will promote a lifestyle of healthy living and change amongst seniors, expected to open in 2024. For more information about Brighten Heights, you can visit our website at brightenheights.org. Here in a moment, I'm going to introduce Dr. Youngberg, but before I do, just a few housekeeping items. If you're joining us through Facebook Live, feel free to leave questions in the comments. If you have joined us through Zoom, you can leave questions through the chat window, and we do want to encourage questions, and we will monitor them throughout, so you can ask them as we go along, and then we will for sure answer them at the end of the webinar, if not during the webinar. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Youngberg. Dr. Youngberg has a practice in Temecula, California. It's called the Youngberg Lifestyle Medicine Clinic, where he primarily focuses his energies there. But he's also assistant clinical professor for the Schools of Medicine and Public Health at Loma Linda University, and a fellow and founding director of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. He has written 3 books, Goodbye Diabetes, Hello Healthy, and Memory Makeover, and regularly speaks and writes publications on these topics. So we are so happy to have you here today, Dr. Youngberg. We've been on quite a journey here. This is being episode 9. I was just thinking how we started out talking about the importance of the immune system back in October when the vaccine had not come out yet, and we hadn't reached this herd immunity concept, I suppose. And so people were obviously very focused back then on, especially on that topic. And then we've gone through a journey of all the strategies, very high level, of course, that people can implement to really help their health from preventing chronic conditions, and especially with a focus on cognitive decline. So today, we've asked you to really wrap this up with a bow of what we've covered so far, and also tell us a little bit about why you're so passionate about these things. So I'll turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, sometimes I do feel like I'm Dr. Webinar. I'm doing 3 webinars today. But no, I love doing webinars because it's an opportunity to reach a lot of people. It's an opportunity to help people understand concepts that can dramatically improve their ability to reach their goals. And so today's topic, I think, is very critical, and it is a great way to, as you said, Susan, kind of tie it up with a bow, kind of bring it all together to discuss the whole issue of the challenge that we have emotionally when we learn new information, is how to apply that in an effective way. And so we've titled today's session, Following Your Plan and Not Your Feelings. It reminds me of a commercial from years ago. It was a Sprite commercial, and the Sprite commercial was all about follow your thirst, right? Just follow your thirst, and you'll be a great basketball star if you just follow your thirst. And I remember even back then just contemplating on the message of just following your thirst. It's basically saying, do whatever you feel like, right? It's just follow your feelings. It's actually a very, very dangerous approach to life, to just follow what you're feeling right now. Any of us who've ever tried to lose weight or improve our health in any way, we can understand how dangerous a philosophy of living like this would be if we would just follow whatever we feel like doing at any given time. I mean, it would probably lead us to the most unhealthy situation we could ever dream of. And so it's really important that we learn how to develop an effective plan, a plan that allows us to get past how we're feeling right now and implement the plan regardless of how we feel at the moment. So um, my interest, Susan, began when I was just like 6 or 7 years old. This was in the mid to later 60s. And at the time, my father was a professor at a university in Argentina. And so that's why I'm a soccer fan, or football fan. And and I remember back in Argentina, we had a parrot, and the only thing I really remember about our parrot, because I was so young, was that my older brother and I had taught this parrot how to say El Rey Pelé. That Pelé, of course, at the time was the world's superstar soccer player. And we were enamored by this. Anywhere Pelé went, he would bring crowds, right, to watch him do his razzle dazzle on the soccer field. And as I was during that time, I remember something that impressed me immensely, and that is my dad had been training to get the Presidential Physical Fitness Award. And any of us that are over age 20 can probably remember sometime during school, maybe every, twice a year, going through these battery of physical fitness tests, sit-ups, push-ups, shuttle run, mile run, etc. Different types of exercises that established whether or not we met a certain standard of physical fitness. What was interesting is that the Presidential Physical Fitness Award required that we reach greater than 85th percentile. In other words, to get the Presidential Award for physical fitness, you had to be fitter rather than 85% of your peers, people your age. Okay, so there was the high standard, right? You had to be in the top 15% of fitness in the nation for people your age. There was another award that was called the National Fitness Award, okay, that set a lower standard of above 50th percentile. So you just had to be fitter than half of your peers your age. And I remember going through this as a student from year to year, and I actually enjoyed it because it motivated me. I know a lot of people abhorred it, and I've read article after article about people saying finally they have done away with this Presidential Physical Fitness Award because it was just so traumatic for so many people. Well, why was it traumatic? Well, probably because the students were never prepared for this test. Okay, how would you like to take an algebra test without ever studying algebra, right? I mean, I would be petrified of taking an algebra, any test for that matter, if I hadn't done my homework, right? Well, that's the reason so many people never did well on the Presidential Physical Fitness Award testing, is because they just took the test. They never prepared for the test. The whole point of the test is to motivate us to do something on a daily and weekly basis that increased our physical fitness, right? I mean, so it was a good thing. And I remember watching my dad I was 6 or 7 years old at the time, and he really, worked hard to achieve this award. So he could accomplish something that was better than 85% of the people his age, even as an adult. So that was the beginning part that kind of motivated me to get interested in health. Now, what was interesting to me is I look back at this now after 40 years of studying health and lifestyle and preventive medicine, and 30 years in the full-time practice of lifestyle medicine. I contrast the level of achievement required by those physical fitness tests to the level of achievement required on most laboratory tests. So when when you do laboratory tests, and we talked about this in the webinar we did a couple months ago on what are the best lab tests and what do they mean and how do we interpret them. And you can watch that right there on our Vitality Series website and YouTube channel. But what was interesting that to be considered in normal on most labs, you just simply have to be within 2 standard deviations of the mean, which means that there's only 2.5% of people who are worse than you are. Okay, and so talk about a crisis in achievement. So when we look at labs today, most labs are, you know, you're normal unless you're in that 2% of the population that's not doing as well as that quote normal range suggests. Okay, so in the webinar that we did on labs, we really highlighted the importance of understanding the difference between normal and optimal. Okay, and I'll leave it at that in terms of the labs for right now. But let me actually give you kind of my personal testimony. It was a time as a young adult when I realized that I wasn't as healthy as I thought I was. Now, how did that come about? It came about through lab testing. You see, all my life I had been passionate about health, and I'll explain why in a minute. But as a young 24-year-old that had been a gymnast for 8 years already, who had who you know, I was into all kinds of different sports. I thought I was super fit. I thought I was super healthy. In fact, I literally at the time thought of myself as one of the healthiest people I knew. Little did I know how wrong I was with that stereotype that I had developed just by looking at the things that I knew about myself, but I hadn't been paying attention to things that I did not yet know about my personal risk. And so when I was 24 years old, this was 1984, I just started my professional training program at Loma Linda University. And as part of one of my favorite classes, which was Lifestyle Disease and Risk Reduction, a class taught by an amazing professor, Dr. Richard Neal, who really motivated me to learn and to really apply myself in the field. And for his class, I had to give a talk, and so a presentation. So I came upon this new information, that doctors Brown and Goldstein had won the Nobel Prize for Medicine that very year for discovering this new thing that prior to that we didn't really know that much about, and that was cholesterol and the role of cholesterol in causing heart disease. So I was fascinated by anything new that I could learn about health and how that impact my personal health. And so I gave this talk, and it generated a lot of discussion. And around that time, one of my classmates was working part-time at the Loma Linda University Medical Center as a phlebotomist, just to make some money on the side. So she was drawing blood and working at the lab. And so she organized for all of us classmates to get our blood drawn and to get our cholesterol checked. So I had studied cholesterol enough at that point to know that the healthiest achievable level, at least as I perceived it at that time, for somebody in their 20s would be a cholesterol somewhere under 150, you know, between 140 and 150. And so since I knew, right, since I knew that I was, you know, healthy, I assumed I would be in that category, right, in the healthiest 5% of the national population at that age. So a couple of days went by after the blood was drawn, and then one afternoon I saw my friend Lori walking down the hall of the school, and she had these lab forms in her hand. She was passing them out. So I'm thinking, great, I'm going to discover how good my cholesterol is, right? And so she came up to me. She had this worried look on her face, like, and I still laugh about it today because I thought she was messing with me, right? She has this worried look on her face. She says, Wes, and she just she said, your cholesterol is high. And I'm going like, yeah, right. Like, give that to me. And I looked at the report, and I had to take a double, triple take because it said my cholesterol was 244 as a 24-year-old, right? And I was a vegetarian, right? And so I had been a vegetarian all my life. And so it really took me back, and I say that it popped my Mr. Fitness bubble. It made me realize that there was something missing, that I didn't have it all together. I needed more. I was definitely doing some things that were really good for me, that were necessary for good health, but they were definitively not sufficient. They were not sufficient. And so bottom line here is that was the watershed moment in my life when I started realizing that I needed remediation, right? I needed to really rethink what I was doing and optimize it, because what I was doing up to that point was not good enough. I needed to rethink my diet more carefully. Just because I was a vegetarian doesn't mean I was always eating healthy vegetarian food, right? Okay. I mean, potato chips and French fries are vegetarian. They're even vegan, but they're not necessarily healthy. Diet soda is vegan. Hey, tequila is vegan, right? Fortunately, I wasn't doing any tequila. I never got into alcohol, thankfully, because that would have been really bad for me. I tend to overdo things, and so that began a need for me to develop a better plan because it wasn't working for me. But my real passion, what really got me into being interested in health and healing potential, happened very early on in my life. In fact, it happened around the age of 10. This is after I'd witnessed my dad in the physical fitness awards, but it was only about 3 years after that. I remember my father now was president of a college in Bolivia, South America, near Cochabamba. And my brother and I were playing softball one afternoon. I mean, we're just playing catch, back and forth, right in the front yard there on campus, in the residential area of the campus. And all of a sudden we saw my dad driving the VW van up to the house. And we were going like, what is going on? Dad never comes home in the middle of the afternoon. I mean, he's president of a college. He's got all these committees and meetings and teaches, and he never came home. So immediately we knew something was wrong. Something was wrong. And as my father stepped out of the car, about 20 feet away from me, I noticed that he was crying. And my brother John and I, we had never seen my dad cry, ever. And so we just immediately started crying ourselves. We didn't even know what was wrong. And so we came up to my dad. He called us, and he very tearfully explained to us that Mom was really sick, and that we had 20 minutes to pack. We had just been on furlough for 6 months back in the States. and then gone back to Bolivia for my parents to continue the work there at the university. And now my dad's saying, you got 20 minutes to pack. We're going back to the States. We're going like, what? What is going on? And I remember I had my baseball glove. And that's essentially all I packed. I mean, I was kind of so blown away by what was happening that we left everything behind. And we just got in the car and got in the plane, got my mom. And basically, make a long story short, my mom had been diagnosed by a radiologist in Cochabamba, Bolivia, with a brain tumor the size of a golf ball. And it was a fast-growing glioblastoma, a cancer that even today, 50 years later, is bad news. It has a very, very low percentage survival rate, like a 2% survival rate. And so we're basically fly to New York. My uncle Russell, who is a physician, met us on the tarmac with a big limo so that we could whisk my mother away and get her to the hospital as soon as possible. So she was then diagnosed and given a prognosis of 4 to 6 weeks to live, even with surgery. They did the surgery because it alleviated immense pressure in her brain. Just a week or two after the initial diagnosis, the tumor had grown to the size of a tennis ball. But you know, she lived 9 months. She was a fighter. And I remember how that affected me. I remember as just a little kid going through that, losing my best friend. I was a mama's boy all the way. And she was just a great mother. She wrestled with us and played with us and read to us every night until my father came home. Then we'd pretend we were asleep, so he'd carry us to our bed. So a couple of years go by, and I'm 13 years old now, and I'm telling you a story because it sets the stage for why it's so important for us to have a really effective plan. And I remember it was a autumn afternoon, a Sunday afternoon in the fall in Michigan, and we were raking leaves, my father and I. And in Michigan, there's leaves everywhere, at least where we live. There's just, you know, we had so many trees. And so we were raking leaves. And after about an hour and a half of talking about sports and how the Chicago Cubs were doing, how the Chicago Bears were doing and all that, we started talking about things that were more important. And I remember asking, I said, Dad, why did Mom have to get cancer? What happened? What led to that? And I remember looking at my dad, and he didn't say a word. And he leaned on his rake, and he turned and looked down the street where trees on both sides of the street were still shedding leaves on a regular basis. And as he looked down that street where we had lived for so many years, ever since my mom had died, I started thinking, and I said to him, before he had even a chance to answer me, I said, Dad, I wish I knew right now what my risk factors are so I could do something about them now. So I wouldn't have to go through what Mom went through at a young age of 39. And without realizing it at the time, that was the watershed moment in my life where my path diverged and I became passionate about health. I would read every book on health I could get a hold of. Every doctor I'd run into, I'd ask him questions or her questions about health, and they were going like, who is this kid? You know, he's really into health, right? And yes, because I didn't just want to know how to cover up symptoms. I wanted to understand the underlying causes of disease so that we could preempt them. Of course, that's what our Vitality Series has been all about in this process. So in the 40 years of my studying this, okay, I realized that if there's one thing I've learned is that you gotta, in order to follow a plan, you gotta have a plan, right? You have to have a good plan, and it must be based on a personalized cause and effect analysis. And so how do we do that? So my goal today is to actually give you 10 pointers, 10 key steps on how to have an effective plan. It's hard to succeed in your health goals if you don't know the underlying causes of your health concerns, right? And so and I've said this before, that optimal health is not something that just comes naturally to anyone. It's something that we must desire enough so that we seek it out and even fight for it. It requires that we have put a lot of thought into it, and that we do comprehensive lab assessments, and these assessments then help reveal our Achilles heels, our weaknesses, what the areas of risk are in our body. We all have tons of risk factors. I've never seen anybody without risk factors. Okay, I used to think I didn't have risk factors, but that was before I assessed myself in a broad way. Okay, so only after assessing ourselves effectively can we devise strategies that help reverse specifically what ails us and helps us achieve optimal health. It reminds me of a statement that Seneca said over 2,000 years ago. He was a philosopher who lived around the time of Christ, and he said, "It is part of the cure to wish to be cured." It seems like, well, of course everybody wants to be cured, okay, but do you want to be cured enough to actually put the time into figuring out what to do? That's where a lot of people fail. So here's step number one: get tested. Get broad-based labs. Don't just rely on that, whatever you get on a yearly physical. Those are good tests, don't get me wrong. They're insufficient. Okay, they're necessary, they're important, but they're insufficient. You need to have a much broader assessment of your health if you're going to really understand. I just met with a patient just a few hours ago for the first time, and he said, "The reason I'm talking to you is because every year I get physicals, but nobody tells me anything. They give me this report that I don't understand. I don't know anything about my health, and I want to be good at taking care of my health right now." So I said, wow, okay, so the first step is let's do a broader assessment. Let's look at what you've done, but now let's expand that significantly. So it's a couple of years ago, I did an interview for a magazine called Vibrant Health. And I actually pulled out a couple of quotes from that I had stated and then rewritten, right, for the magazine. Let me just read this to you real quick. And it's basically, I say this: a knowledgeable doctor can suggest many appropriate simple remedies for our ills, but the foundation of health resides in daily harnessing the restorative power of its three pillars: optimal nutrition, exercise, and sleep. Many do well with one or even two of these, but few master all three. Now, if you've been paying attention or watching our previous Vitality Series webinars, you know that we had webinars in each of those three pillars. And so I encourage you, we're going to say a little bit about that as steps 2, 3, and 4 in how to optimize, how to develop an effective plan. But we have a whole hour presentation on each one of those that I think you'll really appreciate. So to achieve the full benefit of one, I said, the other two must also be mastered. This is why so few of us succeed in reaching our health potential. Optimal wellness can only be achieved with this trifecta as its base for health and healing. So many of us don't test ourselves. Why would somebody not test themselves? whether it's a genetic test or an expanded lab test. Why would some of us be hesitant to get tested? Right? Of course, the simple answer is because many of us are afraid of what we're going to find out, right? And let me suggest something to you. Says that you really want to embrace discovering what your risk factors are, because that is the only thing that's going to make you healthier. If all you do is find out what you're good at, you're never going to fix what you're not good at or what is actually causing you harm, right? So probably the single most important step to have as part of your plan to optimize your health is seek to find areas of your weakness. Seek to find as many risk factors for chronic disease in the future as you can find, because each time you find something, that presents an opportunity to dramatically improve your health. Just discovering what is good or optimal already, what you're genetically already good at, isn't going to help you at all, because that's already considered in your current health status. But if you can find the areas that you're already at risk of, the sky's the limit on how you can dramatically improve your health. So it was Norman Cousins in the book The Anatomy of an Illness, one of my favorite books, where he says, it's my favorite quote from Norman Cousins, who used to be the editor of the Saturday Evening Post. He said, don't deny the diagnosis, but defy the verdict. In other words, people don't want to be diagnosed with diabetes, so they go years without doing any blood tests because they're so afraid of diabetes, because they bought into this lie that diabetes, once you have it, you're going to have it for the rest of your life, and you're going to be on medicines for the rest of your life, and you're going to be on insulin, and there's nothing you can do about that because it's not reversible. Those are all lies. Diabetes is reversible much of the time, most of the time, if you address the underlying causes. So don't deny the diagnosis, defy the verdict, embrace the diagnosis, and then reverse the condition as much as you can. That's what makes you healthier. So it's important to understand that the diagnosis never determines the outcome. Okay, it's only your approach in how you deal with the diagnosis that determines the outcome. Okay, step number 2. Set a regular bed and wake time. Now that might sound to be too simplistic or too hard, depending on on how you're looking at this. But as I've studied this, again, in depth for 4 decades now, I came to this conclusion early on, even as a high school student, that getting to bed at a reasonable hour and getting up at a reasonable hour was probably the single most important part of my plan. Okay, in terms of acting on what I know. You got the lab testing and the assessment phase. Okay, but then you got to do something. If I don't get to bed on time, if I don't get up early, I'm not going to exercise. I'm not going to eat well. I'm not going to do a lot of the things very well. I'm not going to feel well. I'm more likely to succumb to eating junk food. You know how that works. You've been there. We've all been there, right? So set a regular bedtime and wake time. If you want to watch the whole discussion on that, go back to the Vitality Series, where we spent the whole session just addressing why that's so important, to optimize your immune system, to help you reverse whatever health medical condition you have. Step number 3, establish a schedule for exercise, preferably a regular schedule for exercise. You know, just last night, interestingly enough, I was watching the Tokyo 2020 Olympics being performed in 2021, and there was a commercial. There's some great commercials right now associated with the Olympics. And there was a quote in one of the commercials that really hit me, and I made a note of this, and it said this: you don't have to be amazing to start, but you have to start to be amazing. Right? So it's a great quote that says, you know, if if you don't start, if you don't start following your plan, right, you're never going to achieve amazing things. Right? Okay, step number 4. Establish priorities for a healthy diet. Let me back up a second to the exercise part. You know, there's a whole session on that in our Vitality series. Let me just summarize with a couple of phrases. Number 1, okay, light activity after as many meals as you can to get the circulation going, to keep your blood sugars and your insulin levels under control. Critical for health. Doing some type of strength training exercises throughout the week, at least twice a week. Some people do a little bit every day, where you're strengthening the core muscles of your body. If you're not doing strength training exercises, you're nowhere close to reaching your potential for health. That's a critical part. You know what? One of the first evidences is of cognitive decline, or basically the direction towards Alzheimer's in the brain. You know what the first medical sign of that is? Weak muscles. Yes, that's right. Weak muscles is the first sign, because muscles, as they get stronger, directly innervate the brain. They help the brain release brain-derived neurotrophic factor that helps heal the brain. Exercise does all kinds of things to help heal the brain. So make sure that you have different types of exercise as part of your exercise schedule. Okay, number 4, establish the priorities of a healthy diet. Let me just give you one example. We also have a whole webinar on that. One of the best things that I ever did to optimize my health, and from a dietary standpoint, is introduce a vegetable stir fry for breakfast. When I spent time in Singapore as an intern at a hospital in Singapore 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago, I would occasionally be walking around breakfast time. People were eating vegetables for breakfast, vegetable soups. I go like, that's weird. I would never do that. I do that every morning now, and I love it. It's my favorite part of breakfast. I will stir fry some greens, some onions, mushrooms, finely chopped Brussels sprouts, purple cabbage, baby spinach, and then I'll add a little avocado slice or so to that. Wow, that's wonderful stir fry. You don't need any oil. Just mix it up. Just stir fry it. Okay, and so that is a way that I'm ensuring that I'm getting at least 10 servings of non-starchy, colorful, and green vegetables daily. Yeah, not five. Most people don't get 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. I'm shooting for 10 servings of just the non-starchy vegetables a day. Okay, and then we go beyond that. That's what helps optimize. Okay, number 5, challenge yourself. Excuse me. Challenge yourself. I've just finished a 10-day challenge for patients who have diabetes or pre-diabetes or insulin resistance, and it's really amazing. We had individuals that had been on insulin for years. In just 10 days of learning more about their health and checking their blood sugars more carefully before and after every meal, they got off insulin, right? Because they figured out what worked and what didn't. So there's a lot of people out there that say, they believe they got to be on these medicines for the rest of their lives, when in reality, if they just learned how their body worked, okay, and they challenged themselves in a very specific way, that they could accomplish things they would have never dreamt years ago that they could do. Let me give you a couple of examples. When I was in college, every summer, I worked at a Christian youth camp. I was fortunate to work at Camp Asabo in northern Michigan for 2 summers in the early 80s. And then after that, I worked in Canada on this beautiful Lake Rousseau at New Ferenda Youth Camp, where I worked on the waterfront as a lifeguard and swimming instructor for all 4 summers. And I mean, it's just a wonderful way to spend a summer, right? Working with, having all your friends from college and and just, basically enjoying the summer together, doing wholesome activities. So one thing that was really cool about that for me is that one of my college buddies, Scott Kennedy, was really helped motivate me to stay in shape. And we challenged each other, and we developed a series of fitness challenges in order to motivate each other. Okay. And so I remember we were driving, I'll just give you two examples. We were driving back from Canada back to Michigan. It's a long haul. And during that time, we started developing a list of about 10 different challenges. And the deal is that anybody could challenge the other person, and then they had a week to prepare for that challenge, and then the challenger had to go first so that that person who was challenged had a chance to best the challenger. Whoever lost had to pay up $20. I'll tell you up ahead, I was the loser more often than the winner. But here's the point. Through the challenge process, I accomplished things I never dreamt I could do, even though I lost the challenge. Who cares if you lose the challenge if you've dramatically improved your ability to accomplish something at the same time? And so I remember one of them was just, we said, hey, because we were working on the waterfront and we scuba dove. And so I said, let's see how long we can hold our breath. Okay. Well, all that is, after about 30 seconds, you're like turning all red and so, but we started practicing, and pretty soon we're holding our breath for over a minute, then a minute and a half, then 2 minutes. I never dreamt I could hold my breath for 2 minutes, but it was obviously happening because we were both doing it. And so we decided that we would do a challenge, and that to win the challenge, you had to go at least 3 minutes to win the challenge. So we challenged each other right then and there that day as we were driving home from Canada. And, we hyperventilated beforehand. My buddy Scott, he was driving. I was just in the passenger seat. We went 3 minutes. We went 3.5 minutes. Kid you not, I would have never guessed this. We went 4 minutes, and we went 4.5 minutes without taking a breath. We were holding our breath that long. And I mean, we're just shocked. He's the one that's driving, have to pay attention. I'm just sitting there and I'm waiting. I'm going like, how long is this guy going to hold his breath? I mean, I would have never thought I could do even a third of that. And finally at 4:46, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I just took a big breath. And then he turned to me like this. He turned to me, this smiled, and then took a breath. So he was always doing that to me. It was great. It was great motivation. And so I'll tell you 2 more challenges to make my point. And then he, as soon as we got to our university in Michigan, Andrews University, we were both lifeguards there as well. And so we had keys to the pool, the indoor pool. So he challenged me to an underwater swim. And so I'd maybe been able to do 25 yards underwater, if I really tried hard. That was the most I'd ever been able to do. And I thought I was pretty fit. I was a good swimmer. And so he challenges me, so I can go last, so I can try to beat him. So you can't fake, you can't cheat swimming underwater, right? Because you're underwater, you can't take a breath, right? And so he gets into the pool in the shallow end and takes some deep breaths. And so I'm making sure he doesn't have a shallow water blackout, because that's a possibility, so I'm there to lifeguard for him, but also to make sure he's doing it. He does a link, he comes back, 2 links. Okay. He does another link and comes back. That's 4 links. I'm going like, what? And then he does a 5th link and then another half. He does 5.5 links underwater. Okay. In a university pool. And I'm going like, that's impossible. How do you do that? And so I'm thinking, okay, so I prepare in the same way. Okay. And I've never been able to do more than 1 link. Guess how many I did? 4.5 links. He beat me by a whole link. but I bested my record by over 400% just because of the challenge. The whole point is challenge yourself. And I could tell you more fun stories about how he challenged me and won. I did win a couple, but he won more of them than I did. And so the whole point is that I don't care. I'd be willing to pay him $100 just to keep me motivated to challenge myself in a way that accomplishes the unbelievable. Okay, so you'll never be able to accomplish things that are dramatic if you don't challenge yourself. So challenge yourself. That's key. Number 6, set reasonable limits on yourself. This reminds me of a book I read when I was actually in my professional training at Loma Linda. This is 35 years ago. Written by a motivational speaker called by the name of Gordon MacDonald. He wrote this book called Ordering Your Private World. Amazing book. It's I'm sure it's out of print now, but I'd read it if you can find it. And he also wrote a book called Restoring Your Spiritual Passion, which was just as good. At any rate, he said this, I'm going to paraphrase this. Sometimes you have to say no to things you really want to do in order to say yes to the best of things. The implication here, so the point here for step 6 is set reasonable limits on yourself. You can't do everything. You can, there's all kinds of really good things you can put your time into in this life. You can't do everything. You have to prioritize. You have to set limits on things that are even good, things that are even considered healthy. You got to set limits on them in order to be able to put the time and the effort into the best of things. A critical concept. See, if you feel as though you don't have time to exercise, anybody out there feels like, I don't have time to exercise? Are you kidding me? Okay, I don't have enough time to go to bed early. I got too much to do. Okay, I don't have time to really plan healthy meals. If that's the case, then you're not managing your time very well, frankly. Or at minimum, you're taking on more tasks than you should. My namesake, John Wesley, my dad named my brother John and me Wesley, right? And John Wesley was a health reformer back in the 1700s. And he said this was my favorite quote from John Wesley. He said, though I am always in haste, I am never in a hurry because I never take on more work than I can go through with calmness of spirit. So if you're taking on more work than you can go through with calmness of spirit, you're taking on too much work, and that means that you're not setting reasonable limits, and that means you're not able to spend time in having a balanced life, and you're not able to spend time on things that are critically important to keep you healthy for the long haul. And if you're not doing things now to keep you healthy, bad things are coming. So pay attention to that. Step number 7. Don't believe everything you read on the internet. Okay. We could spend a whole hour on this, and we won't. But I just read an article that an email that was sent out to thousands of people, really, making vitamin D look like it's the worst thing, ever. That vitamin D was a conspiracy devised by Big Pharma to make you sick. I mean, it's like I'm thinking like. What this was somebody that had a master's in science that put out this email. And I'm going like, where has this person been? Either they're wholly ignorant of all the research that's been done on vitamin D, or they're using half-truths as a way to pitch selling a different supplement. And that was the irony. They were actually selling a different supplement, and they were shocking people into reading this article about how bad vitamin D is for you, which of course is foolishness, because vitamin D is one of the most important vitamins that we should be supplementing on a regular basis. There's way too many studies documenting that. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that bought into that email. A friend of mine actually sent it to me yesterday and said, wow, I've been taking vitamin D. What do I do? And I go like, Don't believe everything you read on the internet. You got to study it. You got to check it out. You got to compare it to other research. So information, this is an important concept. Information that proves benefit provided by any strategy is not sufficient in determining its use. You keep hearing all about things that are actually good for us. Oh, it prevents this, or it's this effective. But that is just half of the formula. That is insufficient data to determine whether you should use it or not. What else do you need to know? There also must be proof of safety, or that there isn't other ways to achieve the same benefit with options that do not increase risk as that ingredient might. Okay, right? So we got to pay attention to that. And so there's many examples of this, and I'll just give one for the sake of time. The example years ago of a study that said hamburger meat has ingredients in it that lower cholesterol. Big headline. The headlines everywhere in the national press. What's the problem with that? Now, it's true, okay? It is definitely true, but deceptively making you conclude something that actually isn't true. And that is that if you eat a lot of hamburger, your cholesterol will go down. Guaranteed it won't, right? And so the true part of it is that, yes, there's this chemical called butyrate in hamburger that lowers cholesterol. Problem is, there's thousands of other different type of chemicals in hamburger that do the opposite. So the net effect means your cholesterol goes up. Not that cholesterol is the big thing. Cholesterol is not the biggest risk factor by any means, in my opinion. But it's just one way of documenting how people lie with statistics all the time. One of my favorite books from my training at Loma Linda University was a little book called How to Lie with Statistics. Okay, it's in fact it was Mark Twain who said there are three kinds of lies. There are lies, there are damn lies, and there's statistics. And so if you're smart enough, you can use truth to deceive people. Don't be one of those people. Okay, I always put things into the right context, and that way you'll be safe. Step number 8. Set timely goals daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly. Aristotle once said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. In other words, set goals so that you can evaluate them on a regular basis, okay, and create habits by optimizing that activity on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly basis. Step number 9, measure your progress. Keep track. Write out in a simple journal. When I was in high school and college in particular, I always kept a journal. And that was one of the healthiest things that I did. It kept me focused on what was best. So that has helped me stay focused in the past when I did journal, when I measured my progress. And step number 10, reassess. Review steps 1 through 9, and then fix whatever is not working. Get retested to see how well your plan is working. So those are the critical steps that help us to be able to develop a plan that is worth following, and then be able to follow it in such a way that we don't succumb to our thirst, our feelings, our, the follow your heart concept, which basically leads to all kinds of problems when we just follow what we feel like doing, as opposed to following a plan that was developed thoughtfully, carefully, based on good science, and then applied properly, and then reassessed on a regular basis. Let me end with this quote. This is a good quote. We could go on, but we don't have time. When I was in high school, I came up with this little saying. It says, "Do today what tomorrow you'll wish you have done today." In other words, how do you know what the right thing to do is? Put yourself into tomorrow and ask the question, well, now that I'm in tomorrow, what do I wish I would have done yesterday? And if you do that, if you do today what tomorrow you wish you'd done today, you're going to be just fine.
Very good. Well, thank you, Dr. Youngberg. As you were talking about the challenging yourself, and made me think about goal setting. And I want to share a couple stories myself. One is when I was in college, I was coordinating with some folks on a seminar, and one of the topics was time management and goal setting. And we asked an elderly gentleman that was on the campus who rode his bike all over the campus to do a seminar on goal setting. And I had no idea he was going to do this to me. I thought it was just a casual conversation. And he said, well, Susan, what's one of your goals? And I said, oh, I really think I want to run a marathon. And next thing I know, when he's giving his presentation to hundreds of students on this campus, he's sharing with them my goal. Well, Susan wants to run a marathon. So I immediately was like, oh, I guess I got to do it now. But the thing about that goal is now I had to prepare. I had time, so I was like, well, okay, I got to start, so I did research and found out how much running I needed to do and how to pace myself and build up. And obviously by the time I'd done the marathon, I was in way better shape. So if I had just said my goal is to get in better shape, I probably wouldn't have done much of anything and may not have gotten started at all. But because I set a specific, measurable, compatible, all those things goal, then I actually achieved it and got all these benefits in its train. So I think that's a really good strategy you shared. One thing that might be helpful to share with folks is, and I don't know if you have something on your website or not, so this may be an unfair question, but if they wanted more information on testing or how to follow their plan, do you have some suggestions on that?
The first thing I'd recommend is we have some book chapters that are free and downloadable, available to anybody who signed up for the webinars. They can access them through the Vitality, the Brighten Heights website. And so check that out. You can actually download some information. Watch the webinar on lab testing. That'll give you a lot of insights. And then the book chapter on lab testing from one of my books. I've actually two, the book on Goodbye Diabetes, and then the book Hello Healthy, which is basically, our ultimate goal is for our friends and family to look at us and go like, hey, hello healthy, like, wow, you really improved your health. But that doesn't happen just by chance. That happens based on having a plan that's effective and following that plan and reassessing it as you go.
Very good. Well, thank you. The other thing I would like to share with folks is that we are going to have another webinar on August 23rd. And the topic of that one is the power of synergy in your health journey. So we've been talking all along about specific strategies. And you might be thinking, well, I do this pretty well, or I do maybe a couple things really well. So I'm going to focus on this one strategy I'm not doing very well. And that's good. But what you don't want to be like hyper aware of is the benefit of getting several strategies going at once. And Dr. Youngberg, do you want to share anything about just like as a teaser on that topic?
Well, we're looking at synergy. We're looking at how to pull all this together and keep doing it. What we talked about today is actually a really good head start into that. Okay, but I'm going to be sharing some additional information and some actually case studies from my own patients that will really encourage all of you. One of the stories will be on how a patient that was just 5 weeks from his 90th birthday found out he had out of control diabetes, and he reversed it in 5 weeks. Okay, and it didn't just he didn't just do well for 3 to 6 months. Like some people say, oh yeah, it'll wear off after 6 months and he'll go right back to where he was. Well, he just celebrated his 98th birthday and he didn't even have pre-diabetes now. I'm going to tell you the story how he did that. Very, very, very interesting story, and other stories as well.
Awesome, thank you. And the point that he'll be really driving home with that is that with synergy, the results are greater than the sum of the individual strategies. Just really, really powerful. So we thank you for joining us today, and please join us on August 23rd at 4 p.m. Eastern and 1 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you and have a great next month.
See you later.